You're tuned into 9 to 5 Work Rebels with your host, Ebony Gale. This series is sponsored by the PRCA's Race and Ethnicity Equity Board. To learn more about REEB and its mentoring scheme, visit prca.org.uk/REEB.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gems in Comms series special brought to you by 9 to 5 Work Rebels. I'm your host, Ebony Gale, and today I'm really excited to be speaking with Charlotte Mair, who is the founder and MD of the Fitting Room Agency, which is a global brand and marketing cultural agency. I'm talking to her about her journey into the industry, marketing, comms, and PR. So welcome, Charlotte.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Listen, I appreciate you joining me. I know you're a busy lady, so I really appreciate it. As a little bit of an intro, I always like to start off by saying this podcast, essentially, I created it to give people of color, the global majority, their flowers, who have carved out a great piece of the pie for themselves within the industry. So kudos to you for that, okay? So as a way of starting, I want to start off by just saying, can you tell us about yourself? What is it that you do and how do you get started? Because I think you have an interesting story of how you got started.
Yeah, gosh, I've probably done everything you shouldn't do as setting up an agency. So I went to study geography at Brighton University, and it was just because geography was one of my favorite subjects at school. And I did the first 2 years, and then I had to go home for a bit to have surgery. And then I went back and was like, this isn't for me. But in my time whilst I was there, I was also doing an internship at one of the biggest events agencies in London. So I was commuting in for a couple of days a week. And then at the weekend, I was doing silver service, working at race courses and in old people's homes and things like that to make my money. I actually I went from event side. So when I left uni, then I got a job at Centaur Media, that's obviously one of the big publishing companies. And my job was cold calling. Oh my God, it was like soul destroying. Cold calling people to sell them tickets to things like the annual lawyer awards at the Grosvenor House and the data strategy awards. Now, I learned the gift of the gab. I am my father's daughter very quickly. So that was kind of an easy job, actually. And my mother had me talking in summer soirees from about the age of 9 in our primary school. So we were very much children that were put on stage and sort of shown how to navigate that. We're from the home counties in Buckinghamshire, so we were the only black family. So that brought different things, and I guess like a different kind of privilege, because when you're raised around people that aren't questioning things and don't question whether they can go into spaces, some of that naturally rubs off on you, even though you do know the challenges. So from there, I then got my first job in in an events company in Brighton. And again, my job was, oh God, I was on £16,000. And I basically, to pay my rent, I had to sell a certain amount of events to get like my 10% commission of the commission.
Right.
Very different world at that time. But I had the time of my life. When I had no money, there was always an event going on, like a fam trip or something, where someone could give me dinner. It meant that I got to meet and spend some time with some of the people running the coolest venues in London, which I will talk about how that's kind of come to fruition. And it just really gave me a life. Like I just got access to really cool shit. And
cool.
it was, I don't know how to describe it, because when we look at CVs at TFR, we love people that have come from events, sales, or recruitment, because there's a different kind of resilience in you if you've got some level of experience in that space before you want to get into PR, strategy, brand, creative. So I didn't know that path was where I was sort of going. When I was little, I was the magazine obsessive. Like pop culture has been my go-to for like obsessively for most of my life, with your Sugar and Bliss magazines, and running to WH Smith's to buy those products early doors, and having your Peter Andre poster stuck with super glue to your bedroom wall. I was very committed. So I then, after a couple of years in events in Brighton, I went to work in London, and I went to work at a venue called Vinopolis that used to be in London Bridge. And I started off in event sales and loved that. There was 7 event spaces that we would sell to like big brands. So we did events for like Katie Price, Ribena, like big brands and big celebrities. And about a year, 15 months into that, I went to speak to my boss there and said, "Oh, I really want to get into brand and marketing." And I basically went off and read a book. There's a PR power book by Richard Branson.
Mm.
And I went and read that and decided that that's what I wanted to do. So self-taught, reached out to lots of journalists, invited them in for glasses of wine and for a good time at the venue, leveraged what tools I had to build those relationships, then was allowed to start influencing the types of events that we did from a B2C perspective at the venue. And that meant that I got to meet what in those days were the bloggers. This was before the influencer. These are the people that came in and did reviews, old standard WordPress format.
I remember them. Yep.
So I've really built like a pretty insane network.
Yeah.
Then I went over to a B2B agency, which is my only agency experience before I started on my own. And they had started as B2C. They used to do festivals and various things. And then they were retained by people like Lloyd's Banking Group, Marks and Spencer's. And they brought me in to be that in-house PR and brand person. So I did like all the award entries. I did their social media. I did all of that side, the press releases for new work that they had won as an agency. And it was a bit of a funny role because I was sort of like one side step to the rest of the business because everyone else was servicing clients, whereas I was more reporting to the board. I was more reporting to the board and had that kind of brand building piece of getting the stakeholders on judging panels and things like that that built out the agency. And I did that for about 10 months. And then I went to my two bosses at the time and I said, "I'm going to set up my own agency." And they were like, "Okay, fine. Like, what's the plan?" I was like, "Well, there isn't really a plan. Like, I just know that I want to do it." I spoke to my parents about it and my dad said, "What's the worst that can happen? You lose a little bit of money and you move home." I was like, "Yeah, that's exactly the worst that can happen." And that's very much my parents. I'm from a very self-employed family.
Yeah.
So they were really kind, my two bosses at the time, and they basically turned my salary into a retainer. So straight away, I had my first retainer.
Yeah, amazing.
And it was, a decent chunk of change every month. They then gave me they gave me like a pod in their office in Shoreditch. So up to 6 desks. They let me keep my work laptop, all of these things. And then I don't know, I can't remember who did the introduction, but basically I got introduced to Molly Bedingfield, which is Natasha and Daniel Bedingfield's mother. And she ran an event called Global Angels. And it was a once a year, big show, big performers. And we just did this pro bono job. And at the time, I had one person working for me called Susie, who had gone to university with my little brother, wanted to get into events. So Suze came to work for me. And we had no money, like literally. I didn't know about VAT, corporation tax, all of that. I was just having a good time. And so we delivered our first event, which was a night with Joss Stone and Beverly Knight at the brewery. We did all of the global press for it, all the gifting, all the everything. And then a couple of months later, my bosses decided they wanted to have some fun. So they decided to underwrite Cliff Richard's tour, Reeling and a Rockin'. And basically, they then said to me, "Do you want to do the PR for it?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So that became a fairly big job for sort of 9 months in the run up to the tour. But also what happened in that time was we were very bolshy young women and we were on Twitter. This is when Twitter was fully Twittering. And we tweeted saying that we were doing this job and this campaign. And a guy called Jonathan, who owns the Breakfast Club, tweeted us back saying, "Oh my God, my mum and my auntie Janet love the Breakfast Club." And we, being very bolshy young women, said, "We'll give you 2 tickets if you give us a meeting." The Breakfast Club have been with me ever since. Years and years we've been working with them. They are absolute heroes. The people are just as brilliant as the product. And then I had been approached before I started the agency to go in-house at a company called Late Night London at the time, which doesn't exist anymore. Late Night London owned all of the Jewel bars, all of the Tigers. They were that late night go-to. And they had spoken to me about coming in to be, I think it was PR director, head of PR or something like that. Anyway, when I set up the agency, one of my friends who was there as head of sales said, "Charlotte, set up an agency." So the marketing director, Helen, said, "Come in and pitch for what we would have given you as a job." Suddenly we had our next $6,000 a month retainer.
Amazing.
So that's kind of where it came from. At that point, we were very PR. So I had our peak of that era. I had around 8 publicists, predominantly fueling hospitality, leisure, and celebrities. And that was like from big brands like your Cafe Rouges, through to your Cliff Richards, through to working for Gazprom, the big oil company, and doing a big Champions League global campaign for them. And when I tell you, I knew nothing apart from what I had read in this book and my gut. I really didn't have a Scooby. There was no degree, there was no money to start with, there was
amazing. I think
nothing.
that's an amazing story. I'm like, what? I love it though.
Yeah,
Talk
that
about
was.
being brave and just going for it. Like, so I love that for you.
Well, I think as well, like, and I talk about this often, I think in the Black community, I'm very anti-survey.
Mm,
So I think that we do a disservice to young people by presenting these numbers of all the things that can't happen, that mean that they don't go off and try things because they're expecting certain behaviors from certain parts of society. So I applaud some of my upbringing and things that sheltered me and allowed me to have that naivety. So when I started a business, I wasn't starting reading 62% of Black creatives leave the industry within 2 years, because I
yeah,
wonder if I would have turned up with the same energy.
yeah.
So
A good
I'm a
point.
big believer in naivety and the power of naivety, because I think at the moment we've got too much information, and I'm not sure who it helps when I read all these stats and reports. I can't identify who's reading it going, God, this is
This
bloody
is great.
terrible. We've
Oh,
got to
it's
go and
great
do
or
something.
terrible. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
because
get you. I get
we're
you. I get
we're
you.
in the era of individualism, right? When there's a
Yes.
cost of living crisis, trying to do the right thing is no longer people's priorities. Them and theirs surviving is their priority. So the empathy levels and the scale that we had after George Floyd suddenly becomes very different, because people have just got to make money. And
Yeah.
that's where I think the balance of that is a little bit skewed. And I think that sometimes we focus on the not haves instead of the haves. And how do you make those haves bigger and more
Mm,
impactful?
yeah, good point. Good point. Absolutely. So this is what I find interesting because, like you said, you basically stumbled your way in here into the industry. You read the book, you read it, and you're like, you know what, I like this. I'm going for it, and you got in there. So, what was it about the industry that attracted you to it in particular?
So I I am of the pop culture era. So for me, Sex and City, Footballers' Wives,
There you go.
those shows
Yeah,
were my jam.
yeah,
So
mine
I
too.
didn't even really know what agency life was outside of those things. And in your movies like The Devil Wears Prada and that informed a lot of my thinking. And then, at the time, dial-up internet, jumping onto AOL and sort of doing a bit of research around that, getting your weekly magazines, and then sort of looking out for the people that were influencing culture and shaping how we consume. And at the time, a lot of that was Vogue. It was big fashion. It was the big award ceremonies. Pop culture has changed so much over the last 5 to 10 years. So for me, I just went with what I loved. I think, again, sometimes people overcomplicate it, and that's not, do a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Let me tell you, I work and I still love it. But um, I think sometimes the comms industry and advertising and creative, people forget that it's a privilege. Like, choose your hard. Yes, we have hard days, but not compared to what other people had to do. Lockdown happens and we all get to sit in our houses and work very cozily. There's still people delivering your Amazon parcels. There's still people cleaning the streets. I think sometimes perspective in agency world, irrespective of color, is often forgotten. And whereas I live in like, this is a vibe, like, let's be grateful, keep this moving. There's going to be shit days, but the good days will predominantly outweigh the bad days, because most people are good people and they want to do the right things, but people are products of their environments and
Environment.
their experiences.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now, moving a little bit into your lived experiences, right? So, I always ask my guests, when did you become aware of your ethnicity? Not saying that you didn't know you was a black woman, but as in when the outside world met you in a maybe in a stark way. Like for me, it was being first year, 11-year-old, going off secondary school and hearing about Chelsea Smilers because they were like a group of young white thugs that would get a razor and cut you from one side to the other. So I remember hearing about that on the way to school. And obviously they only targeted black and brown people. So that was like my awareness. I've heard of, Mississippi Burning. I've heard of lots of different things, but it's where it kind of met my world. So is there any moment like that happened for you? I suppose maybe moving to the home counties, or did you grow up in the home
yeah,
county?
I think we were aware very young of our race, because you look at any of our school pictures, there is us. The
Okay.
lighting doesn't match, like it doesn't support our skin tone. It's like a perfect storm. We had some teachers that behaved not very well. We had some parents that behaved not very well. Me and my siblings, so I've got a bit older brother, a younger brother, and a younger sister, but my little sister's in her 20s, big age gap. So me and my siblings were sports captains. We were the fastest in the school. We won every race, which used to really annoy the parents. We did all the extra activities like Young Enterprise. I was the managing director. Like we had that presence that I don't really think that I necessarily understood the negatives that we were being pushed back on me. Then my older brother got into Royal Grammar School, which is one of the best grammar schools in the country. I then got into Dr. Chalmers, one of the best all-girls schools, and then my younger brother got into Royal Grammar School as well. And there was definitely it was such a different, I'm 40 next year. It was such a different era of perception of Black people. So I think I always knew, because everywhere I looked, apart from my family, nobody looked like us, but we definitely I always say this, let me tell you, rich people racism is a whole different game. British rich people racism, it cuts you in a way that you don't realize until you've left that space. And your parents, my mum and dad, would be giving each other a look, knowing exactly what's being said, but us kids, you'd only clock it afterwards of what was going on. And normally it was because we were, to a degree, outperforming the norm and the stereotype that they had created in their mind as to what we were going to be.
Yeah. So interesting. So interesting. Now, looking at your career, have you felt like your race ethnicity has ever held you back in your career?
I've definitely dealt with quite a few arseholes. Where we started in hospitality, that is a very white industry in terms of who owns those businesses, even though they profit from other cultures, right, with the different styles of restaurants within that space. I definitely have the things like, if we go out for a team lunch, they'll put the bill down in front of the white person. I'm like, they can pay it. Like, I'm good. Like little things like that. But actually, I put out a TikTok the other day that upset a few people. And basically it spoke about how for the last 5 years I've surrounded myself with older white men. Now, I stand firm in this view. And what I said on it was, because they wrote the blueprint. When I have contracts, or whenever I have things that are rules that have been set of age, I have older white men that I go to. And the reason I say that is because they wrote those contracts. So they know the loopholes in those contracts. They know how you navigate. They know how you raise money, all of those things. And that's been really important. But the thing that I found with some of them, and by the way, this isn't all, because everyone was like, you can never make that sweeping statement in a 60-second video for TikTok. But what they did was, the level of confidence and the lack of questioning why they should be in spaces, I think, is really important. As I say, I do believe that often we are shown all the reasons why not, as opposed to some of the reasons of why yes. So I've always been aware of it, but I think for me, I have my ways of managing it. And also, when I only started doing press and things in lockdown, I did my first article on hip hop for the Marketing Society. And actually, that really helped me find my voice. And now in February, I got my LinkedIn Blue Top Voice badge and all of that. And actually, as much as at the beginning, I was like, oh, this is a bit wanky. What that does is it gives you authority and it gives you trust. So my team get onto new business calls and everything else. And clients and prospective clients will say, oh my God, read about this on Charlotte's LinkedIn. It has become such a powerful tool for us to operate, now building out into TikTok and YouTube and other channels, that it's getting less, but it will always still be there. But I won't let it dictate what my days look like. And we all know the truth, like living again out here, there's a particular supermarket here that have racially profiled my family for years. And it got to the point where my dad went up there and said, like, what the hell? And they sent our family an apology letter. This is one of the biggest supermarket chains in the country. So you still have those little things of being followed around the supermarket. And it doesn't matter how expensive your handbag is or whatever, people are going to make those assumptions. And then you put it on the family WhatsApp groups and suddenly your parents feel a bit sad for you. It knocks your siblings, like all of that ripple effect. And I really do try to streamline and not let that dictate my days, because actually, if I was being honest, the reason that a lot of people have those perceptions is because of the media. I work in the media, like there is a knock-on effect. But I do question some of the things that we are fed to believe about ourselves. And I think that I'm never sure, I think that so much focus on our skin color being a problem, I think we don't even realize the kind of the new type of oppression that's being fed to us as something good, but it's not. And so I'm very observant. Like if you ask my team, I will come in and I will tell them about tweets that I was reading the night before that was incredibly right wing and, sometimes racist. And I will say to them, you have to pay attention to what people aren't saying. There is a reason that Donald Trump is back in power. There is a reason that the Tories have gotten away with what they've gotten away with. Like you have to understand people on the good stuff that you want and also the bad stuff. It doesn't mean you have to believe it, but to do my job well, I have to understand why over half of America voted for this man. You have to do that to do comms well, because sometimes, it often isn't about, we don't specialize in D&I or minority or marginalized or people of color. We are mainstream. I have to acknowledge that a certain amount of those mainstream buyers will have skewed conservative values. So to me, to do my job, whether I agree or not on certain things, I still have to observe the behavior and understand it and understand. Then when you have conversations about people, like again, that TikTok, there was one particularly angry gentleman that was telling me I was anti-black and all of this. And I wrote back a very pragmatic, I said, if we're going to get into name calling, I'm not interested. If you want to have a conversation without a character assassination because of a 60-second video, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. And I said to him, you tell me what you think is going to solve this. What solves the wealth gap? What gets us into more rooms? If this way of working doesn't work, can someone please give me a solution? Because the stats with all this investment in traditional diversity and inclusion seem to be taking us further away from where we were actually pre-George Floyd of the numbers that I've seen. So there are clearly kinks in the chain that we should be able to, as a community, have open conversations about, because we all want to get to the same place, right? But everyone's lived experiences should enable us to have an outward conversation about what are the steps to get there, not just this is the only way that you can get there. Because for every bad report that says that this is happening, there's some old white dude or whatever that has helped 5 other black people get through or help them get funding. But we don't hear that, right? Because that's not the narrative that people want us to hear. And that's why I say, like, you should always pay close attention to where you're sat and what's going on in your circle or at your table.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely important to pay attention to the narrative and what's not being said, because a lot is given in what's not being said usually. Or have you experienced or witnessed racism in the workplace itself? And if so, how was it handled?
So I left being an employee in my late 20s, so very early on. So I am in a privileged position where I can control the environments that I'm in. And if I get a bad vibe, I'm out, no matter how much you're paying me. So I wouldn't say that I've had direct racism in a workplace in a long, long time. And even then, if I was being honest, I don't think it was racism as such. I think it was more ignorance of people not being exposed to black people and having any fucking common sense with what was coming out of their mouths. So, and again, I set up my own company because I didn't, again, being told that they're going to block you, the glass ceiling, la, 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 la. I removed myself from that trajectory so that I could control more of what my life looked like and what I could put back into my family and how I could bring more people who looked like me through. So I would say less racism and more stupidity and ignorance.
Okay. Now, looking over your career, I suppose even now, because obviously your time in employment was slightly short-lived, essentially. You spent most of your time being self-employed, right? Yeah. So now, have you had any situations where you've been like, I wish I'd spoken about something, or I wish I had maybe self-advocated for somebody else in the workplace or anything like that? Sometimes you have those things you look back and think, the Charlotte of today might have said something about that, or maybe not.
So we had this absolute dickhead of a client about 15 months ago, and the project was going as the project should have, but his ego felt that we should be much further along, which was, from a PR perspective, we all understand the timelines of selling in and everything else, but from an empathy perspective, I understand the pressure that he was under from investors and everything else. So we had this one client that had higher expectations than what he was paying for, and that was the reality of doing PR for this product that we were taking to market. And he spoke to me, and this was literally 15, 16 months ago. He spoke to me like I was nothing, and I mean nothing. And actually, one of Daisy in my team, who's been with me for just over 5 years, she's a young white person, and she was sat on this call. And when we finished the call, she said, "I don't know how you're not crying." And I said, "I ain't letting these motherfuckers get anything out of me, right? We've followed the plan that they approved. They've now decided they don't like it. That's a him problem. That's not a me getting worked up." But there used to be more moments like that. But as I say, when I started getting big numbers on social media, we started winning Meta, Instagram, everything else. Like, people know not to step to me with that energy. And I think on the other side, again, if people do their research, they will know that we launched Black Pound Day. We did Black Pound Day for 3 years for Swiss. We launched both of those shops. And let me tell you, that came up on my For You page in 2020. I messaged one of the presidents at Sony and said, we should back this. Then we got on a call with him. And that whole campaign was my agency. And I remember saying on that call, we do not need to have a comms plan that only talks to Black people. If you want to make money, we need the mass that is the 90% to go and buy Black on this weekend. And that was our whole strategy. That's why we got it in Stylist, the BBC. We went to like more traditional, liberal, left-leaning sites after we'd got this is the bulk. You know, the Brits after parties, 2017, we launched those for Since 93. That was the sort of more cultural arm of Sony, if you will. I went out and got all of that funding to pay for those parties, to have a space that 700 Black people could congregate on Brits Night with Stormzy, Maya Jama, Gets. Like, that was us. And people come for me and I'm like, you have not done your homework on what we can do.
Yeah, now that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. But I also like the fact that even with the guy who tried to belittle you, you were like, well, no, you're still standing on ground and you know what you've delivered. And that is your problem. I love that. Park it back where it belongs. Do you know what I mean?
He then moved on to scare tactics. And I was like, let me bring in my lawyer and my FD and let's see how hard this man wants to go, who, by the way, are both white. So I was like, and it all just fizzled away, all the energy. And I'm sure that product is still failing and his ego is still through the roof. But you will very rarely get me on a day anymore where I will, like, it's not worth it. There's one born every minute.
That takes a lot of self-discipline as well. And that's great that even your colleague noticed it and was just like, I don't know how you're just not seething right now, or emotionally, like, you know, you're just like, well, no, let's park it back. I like that. Okay. Put it back where it belongs. That's what I say. I love that. I do love that. So my next question for you is about code switching. Now, do you feel like we can live with our authentic voices in the workplace, or do you think there's going to be an element of code switching?
So, I have quite a view on this because the report that came out, I think at the beginning of the summer, maybe, or the end of the summer, that spoke about people not being themselves in the workplace. I don't think anybody, by the way, gets to fully be themselves in the workplace, because the patriarchy set up what professionalism means and how we operate as professionals. And that starts with white folk through to Black people and marginalized communities. So with my team, I run a very lively office, and I code switch, but not in the sense of, if I'm going into a meeting and we're negotiating a £250,000 deal, yes, I have to come with a certain energy, not because of my Blackness, but because we're doing serious numbers and we need to do a proper deal. Whereas if I'm going into one of our cultural clients and I'm like, yo, this is a fucking vibe, we need to jump on this is our influencer, this is da-da-da-da, that's the personality that I take for that. But also anybody, you know, tomorrow night is our Christmas party, our client Christmas party. We've hired Stormzy's house party. We've got So Solid Crew, DJ Luck and MC Neat coming through to do live performances. Like, that's us, right? If you come to TFR, that is what you are buying. I will have a weave this week, braids next week. If you don't want to do business like that, don't do business with us. I'm good. I know where to make my money. And I think sometimes, and this is like my slight issue, I think, with the comms industry, we box ourselves into being D&I. All of our marketing talks about being inclusive and everything else. And I'm like, we are the shit. We set these trends. So we already talk to the masses. So why have we been made to believe that we can't operate within the masses because of all of these blockers? They are there, by the way, but that you can push through them. And it needs a little bit of luck and a couple of the right people to get you through that. And as I say, that is not to take from anybody's experience, but I do think that we have been brainwashed to believe that we only get a stage in Black History Month in October. Nope. You will book me in March. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that as a group, we need to come together. You know, we use this word community a lot. And it's one of those words that I'm like, does it mean anything anymore? You're just talking about a group of Black folk, right? That are having a vibe. Like it's that, you know, again, it's what do we want to achieve here? Are we wanting the, because I always find it interesting with reality TV shows, right? That are a big part of mass marketing. You never hear Asian and Indian communities moaning about not being included in lineups. And I always think it's really fascinating.
I don't know. I have seen some Asian communities complain about not being in lineups, and that change with Love Island, for example. I saw some rhetoric around.
How much would you say that was compared to the way that it becomes a central part of the Black narrative? Because I would honestly say it's skewed more on the Black side, but I would say that I definitely have seen some tension around the fact that it's not as balanced. Which I find interesting. Because I've seen that change over time. I think that that's quite small, because I think that there's a reality of where we talk about money and generational wealth. A lot of these other communities have established how you do that outside of entertainment. Whereas I think our go-to becomes sports, entertainment, and having a vibe, as opposed to, okay, you want to get influence in politics? That is money. Money is power, whether people like it or not. And I sometimes worry that if you're only getting 5% of the budget because you've marketed yourself as only talking to the marginalized community, how do we get that shift financially? And how do we move past sometimes people wanting commercial outputs as opposed to always purposeful outputs? Because you need a blend of two to truly drive change and impact.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that bit as well. I do think it's really interesting. This is an interesting conversation because essentially, you know, like you said, like you made me laugh when you said the little bit of luck. I was waiting for the rest of the line, you know, I can make it for the night. And I was like, you know, come on, bring it through. But yeah.
I did miss that pun completely.
How did you miss that one? But honestly, I think it's interesting. It is an interesting situation. And you've made some really interesting points there, I think, you know, about, you know, how we navigate. I do believe that, you know, people of color, Black people in particular, are mainstream. We create the mainstream narrative. We create
garage,
cool.
hip hop, R&B.
Yeah, we create whatever's cool. It's always more after us.
Streetwear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with you on that side of things. So yeah, some good points.
What is it that means that we don't, like, one of the other fascinating things, we're doing a little bit of a report on it at the moment, and it's around demographics, value graphics, stereotypical perceptions of people. And it's part of this strategy piece for next year. And we've got a survey that's going out. And one of the really interesting things from the soft piece of data at the moment is how many Black people have more than 2 jobs. So they'll introduce themselves. By day, I'm a this. By night, I'm a life coach, a business coach. At the weekends, I DJ. Then I run, And when we started to pull together numbers, I was like, what is this? Because this is a pattern collectively. Like, what is driving this? Is it that we can't make enough money from one part of it? Is it that our parts of our community are made up in the sense of we love a bit of variety, so we want to do lots of broad things? Is it from a psychology perspective, we find it harder to focus? Like, what are these things that mean that, because again, if you spread yourself across 5 different sectors and 40% of the race do that, can you make significant financial and commercial changes in one sector that give us some of the top seats? Are we spread too thin? Like, what drives that? And again, we don't have conversations about it, because the conversation is all the blockers that have been set by the patriarchy, the hierarchy, that whatever, that mean that we don't push through those things. But there are other variables within that never get discussed.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's absolutely a good point. And if I go further, I will actually end up in a completely different tangent.
I know. I have to, like my brain, I'm like,
in my head, I'm making a mental note to be like, right, I've got to get back up with Charlotte. We're going to have to go for a drink and have a chat. This has to be finished, okay? We've got things to discuss. All right, I'm going to move on a little bit, okay? So in the industry itself, when did you become aware of the color bias within the industry? Was it like through coming to events? Because so for me, like, I didn't really notice it until I started going to more industry events, and then I looked around and was like, oh, okay, I can see it more, because obviously it's on a larger scale, right? And obviously I worked a lot of in-house roles. So most of my companies like had Black people, Indian, everybody up and down the building, not necessarily always in comms, but I didn't feel like, oh, I'm the only one here. at that point, apart from when having to go to like big comedy meetings, and usually I'll be the only person in there. But as a company itself, it was fine. So it was once I started going out and doing more networking is when I started becoming more aware of it and look around the room and be like, oh, it really is quite a majority white industry. And I can see it more now because it's in larger numbers.
See, because I started an event, which is even worse actually than the creative agency PR comms experiential. Like it's 10 times worse actually.
Mm.
I'd grown up in a white area. My thing was more about how can I bring more folks through? What point do I get to where I can bring in the best talent and where people will apply for jobs at TFR, because there's an opportunity to work for a mainstream agency where you get to work on the sickest accounts, but you're also part working for a Black woman that will understand the nuances of what's going on around you. So for me, being honest, adulthood, professional life, career was just an extension of how I was raised. I definitely had to, in my adult life, actively go and find Black friends, because I think people like, if you went onto my old Facebook, it's me and all white girls, and they're like, who the hell is this chick? And people have said that to me before, but I'm like, this is how I was raised. There weren't Black people. So of course my friends are white, and they've been my friends for on the good days and the bad days. But again, from a community perspective, it's quite interesting. Like you'll see TikToks where they'll say, never trust a Black girl who's only got white friends. And I've got 3 or 4 very successful Black women friends that were raised in Kent in the same way, where they only had white friends because there was nothing.
There was nobody else.
Our reality,
yeah. You've been socialized already. You've got nobody else to play with, right? So you're going to make friends with the community based on genuine friendship.
Yeah, the community can be quite harsh in some of that perception. We, as kids, you don't really see color in that way. It's just that's your friend on the playground. And I think we need a little bit more of that in adulthood. But there are some of the things like primary school, to one of your earlier questions, when I think back now, when you sit in the field and everyone braids everybody's hair, I always had to sit at the back because ain't no way no one was dealing with my fro. So there was little things like that. Sorry, I should have said that to your earlier point. But yeah, it wasn't this massive thing. And actually, what I will say as well, which people may not like, but when I said at the beginning around privilege, one of the best things that my parents did was show us how to navigate those rooms. So I don't have imposter syndrome when I walk in to present to a big global brand. I don't have any of those things. Like I have other challenges, other demons for sure. But when I walk into those rooms and my team will say, we walk in and everyone's like doing that, da, 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 da. And particularly when we've got into agencies, actually, that's always a really interesting session. And I'm the only Black person in the room, unless I have one of the people of color from my team with me, depending on what the client is. And my team will be like, they're like sat waiting for when I respond, because then everybody's like, oh shit. So again, but that's like, I can't even explain to you how much reading and curiosity I have that allows me to have really intelligent conversations. Again, to the point of the older white men, like we're potentially doing a deal at the moment. And I went to a handful of them and said, I'm looking at this deal. Someone talk me through it. The level of advice and the level of introductions they've given me to some of the best minds in this company to make sure that I do this deal right is unbelievable. And you just grab a 45-minute coffee with that person and it's a game changer. And again, one of the people on our advisory board, I'll say his name actually, Graham Goodkind, he founded Frank PR. He is a fucking legend. When I first met that man, he said, I'm going to show you how to make money while you sleep. And that is exactly what he did to my P&L. He added in lines of suddenly where you're getting an extra 5 to 15% on the margin. And again, he wrote those rules so he can talk to me about how you do that, how you embed that in a contract. We got our first $1 million brief last year.
Hey.
And I went to one of these guys and it came through my LinkedIn. And I went to these guys, one of them who runs a big experiential agency, and they do about 80 million a year. And I said, yo, this brand's approached me, talked to me. And straight away he was like, their payment terms are 120 days. Don't sign a scope of work without boom, 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 blah, 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 blah. Like you can't, again, if you believe that white folk are against you and these spaces aren't for you, you will never get that conversation and that insight as to how you can scale your business and make it more profitable. Like those things are, Graham gave me my finance team. Let me tell you, the way that they built up our 6 months cash reserves, the proper stuff that they did, that we worked with. It took us 18 months to get to that point. And the structure, you can't, that's why I'm a little bit like,
that's great.
Don't read too much of that stuff, because there's another side to it as well.
I think that's important.
This series is sponsored by the PRCA's Race and Ethnicity Equity Board. To learn more about REEB and its mentoring scheme, visit prca.org.uk/REEB.
What I was going to say to you, though, was I think that's interesting because you spoke about the white men being very supportive. So have you had the same sort of support from white women, would you say? Because I think that's an interesting conversation, because I have a colleague of mine, also from Global Majority, but she's also spoken about sometimes finding it much more easier to have conversations with the white men in the industry and get things moving, but have found some white women to be more of a blocker. So that's why, as you mentioned that, I thought, I wonder if that's a similar situation or maybe not.
So I think it depends which way I'm looking at it. If I'm going for kind of money, legal, growth, the men are, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, have more of a dominance because the bulk of men own agencies, right, over women. So on that sort of growth side, that definitely sits with them. I think with white women, I'm very conscious of ever stereotyping people in the same way I would if someone asked a white woman about working with black women. I'm quite mindful of that language. But what I would say is TFR, and again, from me, of my upbringing, we're really good at those spaces, and also knowing how you can make people feel comfortable. And also knowing, honey, I'm not here to take your job. I'm here to make you look really fucking good with what my agency is going to do for you. You are going to look so culturally relevant, so down with the kids. And that journey definitely on some accounts requires a slightly different approach. But, I did a TikTok the other day where a black woman was saying, I've really struggled with black women. So I think we need to be careful with those assumptions of people, because I think we continue the ripple of what people think of us, and I think that matters. That language matters. They both play completely different roles. A lot of the women have been my day-to-day clients that we work with, and a lot of the men have been the driving force around scalability and money. So they come at it differently. But again, with a lot of our clients, we do a very good job, and that's the black effect, right? If it's not excellent, I'm not fucking doing it. So everyone gets a good job out of us. So it's not really in anyone's interest to be a blocker. But also, again, we're doing this big piece of strategy at the moment for a big group. And we sat in the meeting last week talking about, we're rearranging an estate for a big bar group, basically. And we sat in a meeting last week, and we were talking about safe spaces for women. We were talking about the return of the trad woman and how the Kardashians are driving that, and bum implants are out, and we're back to Kate Moss and skin and everything else. And there was one white guy in the room, and he was like, isn't that just being inclusive? And I was like, oh no, this is white supremacy. This is a social construct, da, da, da. And he was like, talk to me more about that. And we just had, but the framing of it that wasn't, and I was the only black person in the room, right? I had seven stakeholders and directors there that we were talking about. Another CEO for one of the biggest coffee brands in the country. I was sat in a meeting with him, and we were talking about Steve Stout and the Tanning of America. And I was like, look, this book is just incredible. He talks about what hip hop did to America and the deals that he did with 50 Cent and G-Unit and Jay-Z and Reebok and la la la.
I read that one. Yeah, it's really
good.
And
I pointed to his shoes, and I said, the history of those trainers is boom, boom, boom. And he was like, shit. And I always think it's about, you can't expect, there's right and wrong, and then there's life experiences to what people have been around. If you only read certain tabloids papers, right, and I won't say their names, you will have a certain perception. And then the only thing you hear is, oh, a black guy stole such and such's phone. Human nature will naturally put you there on those assumptions. And that's unfortunate, but it is human behavior. So my thing is, how do you unpack some of that? How do you remove some of that? How do we get more people having educated conversations outside of just Black History Month? How do we get books throughout the year?
Outside of it.
Yeah, honestly, every time it comes around, again, everyone, it's no secret, I say no to the bulk of speaking gigs in that month. I'm like, there's somebody else that should be given this platform. I actually have a platform 12 months of the year. Let me give you some other recommendations of some great people that can talk about this, because I don't want myself or my business to be boxed into one part, but I also
Right.
understand. I did a session for the Black Comms Network for CAM probably about 18 months ago. And I
Yeah.
was meant to talk for, I think, 30 minutes. And I think I did 90, an hour and 45. And I was like, this is how you make more money. These are the lines that you add to your budget. This is how you do a scope of work. La, la, la. And I sometimes am definitely guilty of forgetting that actually getting into those rooms and showing people what I've paid hundreds of thousands of pounds for advice on, I can very quickly give out as
Yeah.
free.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I hope we'll be coming back to some more of the Black Com Network events and do some more of that. That
I
sounds
do
great.
love my Cam. She's a little
Yeah, so
hero.
do I. I love Cab as well. So, okay. Now we spoke about the gap and being aware of the color bias. And what about the ethnicity pay gap? What are your thoughts around that? Because the PRCA have put out a report, their race and ethnicity equity board have put out a report around that about the gaps. So obviously we know it's there, but what's your thoughts around that? As we just spoke about the commerciality of, us as people.
The ability to negotiate is an art and a skill. We've just finished a recruitment round, and it was one of the first time we've just hired this brilliant young Black woman. I'm so gassed for her to start in January. And it was one of the first time that a Black person has negotiated that salary with me. Now, and we were talking about the sake of 1,500 quid, right? That was the negotiation. And it's one of the first times that I've had in writing, like, thank you for the offer, really want to accept the role, but sorry, that's a lie. I've had two this year, two Black people. One is already hired and the other one is about starting in January. And it's a really interesting thing around the mindset of us being grateful for what we get given. Now, again, I spend a lot of time with people that negotiate and work for some of the biggest brands. So to contextualize that, we just got asked to give a quote for a retainer for one of the biggest brands in the world. I went to my advisory board, one of them, and I said, we've got this. I'm trying to work out what the numbers should be. And I said, we delivered one strategy project for them earlier on in the year. We charged them 55 grand. The value of the event was around 700,000. So I was like, so we were probably on about 7.5%, 8% of the total spend to bring it together. And what we sort of worked out was, okay, let's make that our base. So whatever the total spend is of what they're delivering, our fee for a retainer or ideation or whatever it might be is going to be between 8 to 12% of that. And it was just that talking it through as to what looks like. Right, so we're going to start at 12, knowing that 8 is our minimum. And that's going to be our benchmark and our methodology for that. So I think, and again, like I never know how much to say. I get slightly traumatized young Black women write to me and approach me about working at TFR, having been at a Black-owned agency where they've had a not very great experience, which I'm very, very mindful of in setup. And so they're offering their services to come and work for me for free, which we don't do at TFR. Anybody that works in the business, intern, work experience, whatever, people get paid. That's just a flat thing, mainly because women don't ask for enough as a whole before you've even got into the nuance of race. So I try and encourage them. In TFR, we talk very, very, very openly about money, like really openly about money.
I love that. I can tell you're quite open. Even we're having this conversation, I'm like, Charlotte's very open. I can just
what's the fucking worst that can happen? Like, if you're going to be your true self, then be your true self. Because again, to your point around code switching, I'm like, nah, this is what it is. Like, you want to do business? Great. You want to be friends? Great. You want me to mentor? Great. But if you don't, it's cool, because there's a lot of folk that I don't like, right? And that I wouldn't do deals with because our values don't align or whatever. But I always like, when you see the person online, if you're on my Instagram or my LinkedIn, when you meet me, that's who I am. And again, people may not like what I say, but it will always be backed up with rhyme and reason. And we need to get better at having conversations that are truly inclusive, not just what the bulk says. Because again, with D&I and all of these initiatives, people are making money. Let's pretend that people that Black people aren't making money from the disparity. Like that's capitalism. There's two sides to this. And my thing is always, how do we get more people sat in more seats from more sectors?
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. But on the gap bit, I think you're right in terms of, I think it's great that you had someone who came back to you and negotiated on their salary. And that's something I'd done from an early stage as well. Like, I always was like, I'm going to get paid what I'm worth. Do you know what I mean? So there's no harm in pushing. And I know, like, I've had colleagues that were maybe white ladies or whatever, and they'd be like, oh no, Ebony, go for that or push for that. So, and it helps to have that, it
you need
does
those
help.
people. You need the
It really
people
does
that
help
aren't
to have that.
thinking that they're any less of a person because of the color of the skin. They're just going in with all that privilege. And that's why I say, like,
Oh, listen, I don't even think about that. When I'm going into it, my skin is not a case of any, I don't have that on my mindset, which is also
yeah,
partly why I like having this podcast. So everyone's stories can come out and shine.
yeah.
But for me, I don't go into the place thinking, okay, yeah, I'm black, you're going to be offering this amount of money. Absolutely not. This is my worth. This is what my skill set is. And this is what I'm expecting to get. And if it doesn't line up, then, it's all right. We can keep it
And
moving.
but I
Okay.
think that comes with experience.
Yes, I have been in the industry for over 20 years.
Yeah,
So absolutely.
it's that confidence bit. So it's a little bit like I always say that journey of self-belief starts in primary school, which is another reason why I believe that the D&I system is faulty, where you start at the top in adulthood. Your self-belief and how you see yourself when you look in the mirror starts from 5 years old. It starts from how many times you're stopped by police for stop and search. All of those things puts a value on how you perceive yourself in the world. So I actually think with D&I would always flip it and go, what can we do in the schools? What are the conversations happening with these young women? Like we just sponsored, I think we're the first sponsor of the Coco Black Princess Ball that Selena's doing.
Yeah,
She posted on LinkedIn. I was like, yo, hit me. And I literally sent her back an email saying, we're down, we'll sponsor 50 girls, like looped her with finance.
Brilliant.
Pay it. But again, because people will go on and watch one video where I talk about white men, the only reason that we have the budget to do that is because we negotiated better deals. So we have a proper marketing pot that we can pull from and support community, as well as the awards and all the normal nonsensical agency stuff that you have to do, as well as feeding into the culture and hiring Stormzy's venue and doing those things. And that's the balance,
Yeah, really, really, really interesting. So what's your thoughts on allyship? Because I feel like you will have a lot to say, okay? What's your thoughts on allyship? Like, what's a great example to you?
Oh, these buzzwords. Oh.
Yeah, but I will say your guy at Frank PR, I feel like he's a great ally for you. I feel like he's a great example of an ally. Like,
he's absolutely brilliant. And Jonathan, who is the global CEO and founder of an agency called Amplify as well.
Yeah.
These are men that have done incredible things and they've reached points in their lives where they want to help people, and they're excited to learn. Like Graham will always say whenever we have a call, he's like, I've got my notebook and pen. So when you start talking about cool shit, I'm scribbling it down because when we get the call, I'm going to go and Google it, right? We have a really open relationship. And he's also one of those people that I've really educated about the Black experience and why things have happened. And I think to your question there, when I first started working with Graham, I had like all these taglines for what the agency should be on paper. And one of them was, we create hype, demand, and legacy. So I was reading them out to him on a Zoom one day. And he said, that one, hype, demand, and legacy, you've got to do that one. I was like, well, the thing is, Graham, I think that people see the word hype and they see a Black person, they think a load of smoke and mirrors and noise as opposed to strategic awareness part of the funnel. And he was like, Charlotte, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you are good. And actually, again, we trademarked that. We've got it across clothing.
I've seen it somewhere. I've seen it.
So he sometimes like pulls me back to common sense if I've had that because he's coming at it as a white man that's had this agency for multiple years and everything else. He's like, no, it's just cool. And it's what every single brand needs. And sometimes he has to give me a shake of like, no, you're overthinking this actually.
I was going to say that, you're overthinking, aren't you? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that.
So when we get inquiries now, they'll come through the website and they'll say, we're looking to create some hype, demand, and legacy. We're looking for some demand. And actually, it's really interesting how people play it back to you. So from that perspective, I would never call that, allies, mentors, or sponsors. I would never categorize them like that. These are people that I just have a really great and respectful relationship that I would never put in a box, because they firstly just be good people. And secondly, that I know that I offer them something different to what their life has been when I talk about experiences. And I'm like, oh my God, at the weekend, we were on stage at Coachella with Idris Elba. And they're like, what? And you're like telling them the story of how that, oh, I had lunch with Jimmy Iovine last week. And you're telling them the story about how that came to be. Yeah. So I don't, those things, those titles don't, it's not really my jam, to be honest with you. Surround yourself with good people, add value both ways, and be clear on what that relationship means. Like, again, like another one that advised me this morning, I was talking about this deal. He just introduced me to probably one of the top people in the country that deals with M&A. And he's like, Charlotte, they're going to give you a coffee. They've been with us for 10 years, la, la, la. And I wouldn't in my head go, that's my ally, that's my mentor, that's my sponsorship. No, that's just a really great guy wanting to pass it back down to somebody that he's seen turn up on the good days and the bad days outwork most people because they've had to and carry on going even when the fucking chips are down and you go into COVID and you've got 85% of your revenue is bars and restaurant and they all close and you still get up and give all you've got. It's yeah. So I don't know if that was the answer that you were
That
looking
is the
for,
answer. Whilst you might not subscribe to the term allyship, I think that's quite a helpful answer for actually others out there who do. And I feel like the examples you gave are great allyship examples, to be honest. So what motivates you and what inspires you to keep going?
Oh, what motivates me? I love pulling off shit that people tell me we can't do. That is like my absolute favorite thing ever. I love proving people wrong. And actually, with my team, I don't know if you know Tim Grover, who was the coach for Kobe, Michael Jordan.
Oh,
He did some with
yes.
Dwayne Wade. He's this incredible basketball coach that builds out teams. And he talks about his teams, and they are coolers, closers, and cleaners. And basically, underneath that, is a set of metrics as to how that person operates. So, for instance, a cleaner is someone who, no matter the set of the circumstances or what's going on, they will always close the deal. Then another one of them is that person will perform really well as long as the variables don't go against them. If the variables go against them, they'll start blaming everybody else and da da da. So my team, in our org chart, underneath each one of them, it says what they are, right? And I know at my inner circle and at my table, I need the bulk to be cleaners. I do not want to hear this happen. And again, my team will tell you when they go off on something about something, I will say, get there faster. And I'm like, I don't need all the noise. I know you will have gone into that situation with the best of intentions, but there will be multiple variables that have now led us to this output. But tell me the output, and I will tell you how we're going to get back to where we need to get back to. And I'm like, and like, my mum's really bad with it as well now because she picks up little things now. So if one of my siblings is saying something, she'll be like, get there faster, which is like such a, like, if you use it in the wrong context, it's a little bit like, you know,
Serious, because you're going to be looking like, hey, mum.
yeah, like, all right, pal, calm down. So for me, like that proving that wrong, and also I love to move at pace. I hate slow shit. Like you cannot be around me and be a no person. And actually, where we've made some senior hires, and those people that come from agency are like, oh, you can't have this because I'm like, I'm sorry. Like I'll say to my head of ops, like, you can't have that person at my table because that's not what we've come here to do.
Yeah.
So doing things that people say that we can't do is an absolute one. And I think that like we are on God's green earth for a minute. I intend to enjoy those minutes. That's not to say there aren't bad days, hard days, and everything in between. But generally, as I said at the beginning, the bulk of people are good people. People are products of their lived experiences. So when you have an experience with me, I hope, or my intention is to always make sure that it's a good one. Even if you don't like what I'm saying, like there'll always be like a healthy debate and a good conversation, and we leave with a respectful, whatever. And I think as well, like as a Black woman, so a lot of people where we've gotten advice, they've been like, you need to say that you're Black owned. And I'm like, absolutely not. You can say that as a white person, not understanding your biases, that when most people read Black owned, independent agents or whatever, they are immediately putting you in a box. So that will never be language. I think one set of creds went out with it and I'm like, no, take that out. It's a little bit like when my team give me the CEO job title and I'm like, I'm managing director because I still manage day to day and I am a director. I do not have a board that I am answerable to. I can decide whatever the hell I want to do on a daily basis. So for me, like titles, in fact, I didn't even have a job title until we were in lockdown. I think it was like 2022. Someone was like, you really need a job title in your emails. I was like, why? People should be talking to you the same way if they think you're
no
somebody.
matter what level you are. That's how I feel.
Exactly.
I
don't know where all that
I don't care if you're high or low. I talk to you exactly the same because
the same.
you're a human being. It's just decency, right? So
some days I'm the intern, literally. Some days I'm packing gifting boxes. Some days, I'm in board. Like I don't really care about that stuff. But I do want young, Black, marginalized people to understand that you can do it. It may take longer. There may be more bumps in the road, but you can do it. And a huge part of that is getting the right people around you to keep on pushing, not the people that are going to tell you, sending you links of, did you see this study? It doesn't help anybody.
We don't need that as a help situation. I'm still not. When I started my own business, everyone was like, new business didn't start. Most of them the majority fail and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I want to hear that. It's fine.
No, and that energy, that subconscious feeding into you, I don't think people always appreciate what that does to you.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that, this year we've started working with like Meta and Instagram, and it's been like one hell of a ride. To deliver
I
some
bet.
really epic work. And
Yeah.
even so, we just delivered Meta's annual festival, Meta Festival, for the EMEA region. And it was, again, when we talk
Amazing.
about influence and getting into the right rooms, in our first strategy, we spoke about having Melissa's Wardrobe on stage,
Mhm.
Olamide, who founded Topicals, and
Yeah.
we got both of them on stage. And
Amazing.
Mel was the headliner. We got 400 Topicals goodie bags. So when everybody left that conference, they took a Topicals goodie bag. Like little things like that, people underestimate in between telling you that you're a sellout or whatever. No, 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 no. Just got those people onto stage, got
Yeah.
them paid properly, all
Yeah.
of those
Exactly
things. But
that.
my way to get there may not be the same as somebody else's.
Yeah.
That's
Which
the
but
truth.
doesn't discredit what you've done either. So you're also making a massive impact. So what would you say you found the most challenging on your journey so far?
At the beginning, not knowing, not having enough people around me that were from an agency background who could have probably, if I look back at my first 3 years, a couple of tweaks in the network would have got me there quicker than what
Right.
I have done. Definitely that over the last few years, as I've been sat at some of these tables and the way that some of these deals and stuff get done, when you understand that, everyone goes, oh, they're just on the golf course. No, there are other loopholes that you can find to get into, to navigate into certain spaces. So yeah, definitely we had a great network in terms of getting people to spend, but I needed a better network in terms of getting people to advise and to scale how you do that and what those deals look like, those length of terms, again, the loopholes, the
Yeah.
additional charges, because a lot of these men learnt them from being at your Freuds and the bigger agencies before they
Yeah.
went off to set up their own. Again, think back to 10 years ago, very few black folk in those agencies, for that advice to be generational and be passed on. So definitely, definitely that. But also, I think that, oh, this might sound really bad. I think that we are so focused on our communities being all black people that I think that we miss out on some of the great stuff that white people can do. Outside of Black History Month, I think that when I talk to young black people, like I did the HSBC Black Business Show in Birmingham a couple of months ago. And I said to them in the screening, if you want me to get on stage and talk about trauma, you have got the wrong gal, not doing it. If you want me to talk about tangible things that someone can take and execute and how they build their business, I'm your gal. And they said, yes, that's fine. Now, really interestingly, on that stage, I think it's online, you can probably watch the panel back. People were talking about business plans, and I was like, nah, fuck that. You need to be able to sell. There is no business if there is no money. Cash is king. Are people outside of your family and friends willing to buy your product? And that was one of the first things that I focused on. I didn't do business with friends. I was like, to get a proper retainer, what's got to happen here? To grow that retainer, that contract length, what's got to happen here? But that was sort of more of a self learning piece, and who are the people that will spend money. And when I got off the stage, like HSBC were laughing because they were like, you were basically mobbed, because it was a different perspective. I
Hmm.
was like, you don't need the fancy decks, you don't need that shit, like don't get focused on that. And just to go on to that, after doing that, HSBC signed us for strategy, as
Yeah.
that was one of our clients from that
From
piece and
that
that
talk.
that
Yeah.
education.
Yeah.
So
But it's so
yeah,
true. It's so, so true. And I find it really mind-boggling how people get so caught up with the titles and all these extra bits, but it's like, what's in the detail? What is it? So as you're saying these things, I'm just nodding away like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Like that's how I think
CEO of what?
in those
CEO
sort
of
of things.
yourself, because there's no money.
Yeah.
And like, I just, for what, to write that title on LinkedIn and in your Instagram bio, I just have no interest in that, which is why you won't see that for a good while
Yeah.
next to my name, because I would just want to do the work and do the growth.
Yeah, but I also I just love the way that you just broke it down, which is just don't worry about all the fluff, essentially. Do you know what I mean? Don't spend all this time worrying about a business plan if you haven't got the right product that actually people want to get into. And like, what is it all about? Love that. I really do. Okay, so putting your hat back on as an employee, or in fact, you can just use your employer hat, in fact. Let's use your employer hat. What to you makes a good working environment?
Oh,
I know you're not big on DEI, but I always ask the questions like, what does a good DEI look like for you?
So I focus on the word inclusion, I think, as a starter around that. People won't know this, but TFR is 50% people of color. You just won't know it because we don't talk about it. Because in my mind, I made sure that when we put out the roles and when the different channels that we promoted them on and the distribution for it was just fair and inclusive, that anybody could apply for it. I made sure that I was a vocal point so people could understand that it was a Black owned business without saying it. And I just positioned it really tightly. I think one of a young person of color just left the business a couple of weeks ago, and I got from HR yesterday her exit meeting notes from them. And she said, like, this is the most inclusive, fair environment. And that really matters to me, but we don't shout about it in that way. For me, it's about how I navigate the room. And as I say, like, we've had a few clients say stupid things to the team, and everyone knows that as soon as that gets brought to my desk, it will be dealt with.
Yeah.
And it has been. And that's not normally necessarily around race. It's normally around class, perception around class.
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely been a learning from me. And it's an interesting one because I'm Black, but I was raised in the home counties. So it's that class thing. And because I happen to speak how people want me to speak, and I happen to dress how people want me to dress, the assumption is what is. So for us, like, it's vibes. Like, I love, like, I said to the team, it's like 3 years ago, we were sat in the office. I was like, should we go IB for next week? Everyone was like, fuck yeah, let's go IB for next week. And there's literally the pictures of us all over Instagram with, like, Wayne.
I think I was seeing you lot in IB, but I didn't realize it was a win. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. We were literally sat there and we went the next week. And then, like, in January for the Christmas party, I took them all to Barcelona for 2 nights. Danielle's been to LA with me once and then twice again for Coachella. We're getting ready to open an office in the Netherlands next year, so we've been traveling to Amsterdam as well. Cade, we went and did a culture trip to New York, and we just went to, like, observe and just, like, it was
vibes. I like it.
Yeah, like, we do loads of team lunches. Yeah, and I'm like, guys, like, it's not that deep. Calm the fuck down. Like, let's get to the solution. And again, like, some people really struggle with it. But again, where I talk about my advisors, they'll then ring me and go, Charlotte, I just had a fuck it moment too, and just book this for the team. And I'm like, I love that for your team. It's a different thing that they haven't considered. And that's why I talk about, when you say about allyship, it's like, it's 2 ways actually that I'm pouring into them in a different way of things that they wouldn't have considered, which is why those words I find a little bit jarring. But yeah, I don't want to go to work and be like, I fucking hate it here. I hate the people. I hate everything. Our office, we've got the marathon continues, skateboards, Nipsey, basketballs. And actually, we've just opened an office in Manchester, and the new head of client services there sent me over a note last night saying, these are all the things I want to buy for the Manchester office. And I was like, love them, but also I need them to be more off-white. I need them to be more hip hop, because across all of our offices, there needs to be this thread. And that thread, whether people realize it or not, is underpinned by Black culture. And you will only know if you know. But that's the little things that we permeate in the room.
Yeah, I love that. I need to come to your offices ASAP, please. And thanks.
Our offices are fun. They are chaotic. But, like, on Thursday we've got we're doing a TikTok all about the best Christmas bakes. So we'll buy from Greg's, we'll buy everyone's, and the team will do a live taste test for TikTok. And
that'd be cute.
Just some nonsense, right?
Yeah, but that's fun stuff to do. Like, I get it. All right. So we're going to move into your proudest moments now. So what would you say has been your proudest moment? It could be a work or personal example. And what has been a career highlight for you?
A career highlight, there's so many, because there honestly has been so many moments where I'm like, is this my life? I think definitely we've never really spoken about it, definitely meeting Jimmy Iovine. And the reason that was so lovely was because in 2019 we hired a skate rink in Wembley, and the money that went to that skate rink, part of it went off to help predominantly a young Black youth. So I was like, right, we'll hire that. We're going to get all of our clients out of central London. They're going to come to Wembley, and we're going to have a roller disco. And, like, there was my nan on skates, my dad on skates, and we had Sweet Female Attitude and DJ Luck and MC Neat perform. We had Cos, Crepton Conan's DJ come through and do a set. It was like a whole vibe. But when people arrived, we asked them to bring sanitary products to donate to local schools, and we asked them to bring food, non-perishable goods for food collections, which is the same for our party tomorrow night. You have to bring non-perishable goods, and we donate those to a local food kitchen. So from doing that, and from being really nice. When 2 years later, 3 years later, I was sat in Texas at South by Southwest and my phone went off and it was the guy that I had booked that hall with. And he was like, Shah, I've got a new job. And I was like, oh, babes, like, congratulations, da, da, da. And he was like, I want you to come and meet the owner. And I was like, oh, who's the owner? And I'd seen this being announced in press, but I hadn't kind of put two and two together. He was like, it's Jimmy Iovine. And I was like, Jimmy Iovine as in Dr. Dre, Beats by Dre. And he was like, yeah. I got back from Texas and 2 weeks later, I was sat on the rooftop at the Dorchester with Jimmy and his wonderful wife, Liberty, their chief of staff and my connect. And 5 weeks later, I flew to LA to go to their offices in Santa Monica to have another meeting with Jimmy and his team. And that was a real moment. As some people know, we repped Idris Elba for 4 years. On retainer. Yeah, we literally stopped with Idris on retainer basis in April, but we worked on Luther, which was amazing, like in New York for the Luther premiere, the London premiere. Again, like when he played his Coachella set, we were on stage with him and all the celebs in the dance hall, and it was insane. So yeah, just so on the moments, I couldn't even, like that first Brits party that we did when Stormzy arrived and Maya Jama, and we were like, did it, culturally, we got the venue, we got the 700 people, we got the bar underwritten, I got all of those costs so that the client didn't have to pay for any of it, and we did it for another 2 and 3 years, and like in the second year it was in partnership with Beats by Dre. Gigs came out and did a surprise set during Charlie Sloth's. Like, so many moments I couldn't even put into, and some make the internet and some don't, because I'm like, this is the first interview where I've mentioned how we ended up meeting Jimmy, because it's just different things, the horses for courses. In terms of, so that's career highs. What was the other one?
So the career highlight I was going for, and your proudest moment.
Proudest moment. This is gonna be really random. My little brother used to work for me, so he did 4 years at TFR. And when lockdown hit, he'd always wanted to have a food business. And I said to my mum, I'm about to boot him out because the shops are empty. People can't get delivery slots. And if ever there was a time to launch a fresh food business, it is right now. Oh, yeah. So my little brother still runs that business. It's coming around to 5 years in April next year. He went out to do the Euros with the England team and catered for them, England team, family and friends. He's got Vodafone, he's got Expedia, and I built his first website in Wix for him in lockdown. We are like family. And watching him grow that business is such a proud thing, because a lot of people set up businesses in lockdown that when the world came back, those businesses disappeared. But he's managed, he's got a barn out in Amersham in Buckinghamshire. Amazing. And it's just incredible. And I
love that.
Again, when we talk about generational wealth and creating other opportunities for people, it's things like that, whether that be family or friends. And I don't know how much I love having people perceive me as having a voice and a personal brand. I hate that term, like beyond hate. It really gives me the ick. But I do like that now I've gotten to a point where, so when I made the video about old white people started making the kind of the duet versions of it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
duets.
some of them started coming off my For You page. And actually what was really interesting is Black people that I didn't even know were in the comments saying, that's not what she was saying. Boom, boom, boom. And for me, that's really important, because we should be able to have open debates. And when I think about my legacy, so when I did that video, the amount of Black American women that sent me LinkedIn messages saying, you are so brave for getting on the internet and saying that, but my God, you're right, sis, compared to the Brits, was so fascinating. So the proud moments is definitely building on making sure that as many people come up as possible. And cultivating that environment for, it is like the Cocoa Ball, as I said to you, I believe it starts in primary school. An opportunity came to shape how 8-year-old girls feel about themselves and feeling pretty and getting dressed up. I'm absolutely sponsoring that. And I'll absolutely be down to be the first one to put cash in. So that's it. Those are the moments, far bigger than the career highs are the sexy shit that you get to do. But the proud moments are the bits when you know that you have made somebody's day better, and they're going to perceive things just a little bit better after they've spent time with you or work with you or whatever.
I definitely agree with you on that one. Lovely. So what are your thoughts about how the industry will evolve over the next few years? Because, everyone's talking about AI and, whether it's going to take out and kick out people out of their jobs, which I don't think it will. But what are
No.
your thoughts about how it will evolve?
AI is just like when the internet came about. It's like when we put down CDs and went onto streaming. Like it's an evolution of what is. At the moment, I think it's problematic because it's not legislated and the bias and rules around it are not quite where they need to be. But I'm definitely a believer, and the structure that we built out for TFR from an agency perspective is much more execution will be in-house. And agencies will really take on that strategic consultative side of how they work with clients and also how they keep them up to date and moving really quick. You know, that's why I talk about pace a lot of the time, solution focused pace. I think one of the things that I'm waiting to see is how it plays out with the big network agencies. I think that that's really interesting when you're carrying that much headcount, very big job titles and salaries, what that will look like and the role that boutiques and hubs will take on. We have been adjusting our proposition over the last 18 months to make sure that our content and social USPs are at the forefront of our service. Then our secondary services, activations, and that kind of experiential storytelling. And then actually PR and traditional influencers sits at our third revenue stream. And that's kind of the framework that we're going into with the top line business plan for how we roll out 2025. And also understanding that the UK ain't got no money. So actually, how can you very quickly grow outside of the UK? And the UK becomes your operational base, but you make your money in the global markets. Like, what does that look like? Yeah. Without risking, you know, the UK still has its place, but it ain't never going to be that you're going to grow hard and fast in this country because this economy is not going to recover for a good few years.
Not that quickly. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get what you mean on that. No, thank you for those. And what would you say are some key lessons you've learned throughout your career? Maybe 2 or 3 key lessons you've learned.
My first thing, which I say to my team often, is it's not that deep because it really, really isn't. Very rarely is the world about to fall apart. We've all had a big fuck up, sent the wrong press release, like everyone's been there. But the world does continue to spin. So it's not that deep. Run fast and jump high. Life is so short and so precious. Do not let other people influence and dictate how you see yourself in the world. If you believe you can be great, go out and be fucking great. But make sure that you've had a sense check from people that you're not believing your own bullshit and that you actually are great. And that proposition and that thing that you're taking forward has been proofed and checked to be everything that you believe it to be. And help people, man. Send the elevator back down. It can be very lonely at the top if you let yourself get lonely. Oh God, I've probably got 4. Don't believe your own hype. That is a big one for me because let me tell you, as I say to my team, one bad quarter and you can be fucked as an agency. And I think that people forget that because when they're high, they're really high. And I think that like in this economy, like life can change. I think it was Cheryl Cole who said, be careful who you kick on the way to the top because I'll kick you twice as hard on the way back down. I think there was an X Factor falling out like years ago. And there was something that it may have been said by somebody else first, but it always stuck with me as to how we treat people in agency and in business and in careers because you just don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's some brilliant and very helpful advice. And even when you were saying about, sense check, X Factor is what carries my mind. In my mind, I was like, yeah, don't go out there and trying to act like you are sounding like Beyonce and Whitney Houston, and you sound like, a cat, in heat or something. Like, please, let's not do it. Okay. So, yes, I get that. Great advice.
Parents are a good barometer for telling you, you know what, babes, you're just not that good.
Not that good.
Probably a different career is made for you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So what advice would you give to young people of colour, specifically, who are like looking to enter the industry?
Reach out the person on LinkedIn. I stand really, really firm on this. And actually, I get approached by a lot of young Black people that are starting fashion, and I'm like, have you got LinkedIn? And they're like, no, I've got Instagram. I'm like, money isn't made on Instagram. You get noticed on Instagram, you get the clout on Instagram. But if you want to go to where the buyers of Selfridges, Harvey Nicks, those places operate, and you want to study how they do what they do, you need to head over to LinkedIn. We've won some pretty big clients via LinkedIn. So I'm a firm believer in investing in that and using that as a place to find your voice and build your confidence. Again, knowing that not everybody's going to agree with what you say, and that is okay. But it puts you in a place where you can have a healthy debate and a conversation and build a different community. Actually, I've met so many people through LinkedIn, and we've made, a fair amount of cash through LinkedIn, but it also acts as a voice of trust, actually, to allows you to navigate the business world slightly differently, because people don't go on and check for your Instagram if you're in corporate world. They go on and check your LinkedIn. They add you on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
So play where the players are playing. Like,
yeah,
that matters. Don't
yeah,
just be on Instagram because your friends are going to like your posts. They're not going to pay your bills, right?
exactly
You've
that.
got to go where the money's being spent.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate those good advice for the young ones coming in. And where do you actually go for industry/peer support? For
Oh my
example, I'm a
God.
member of the UK Black Comms Network.
I'm actually
You
not
know,
a member,
yeah,
not for any reason other than I just never got round to signing up.
funny enough.
I'm not really a member of anything other than Soho House, which sounds
Okay.
terrible, which is my lifeline. I've got things like the Stack membership, actually, as
Okay.
well. Huge fan of Sharmadine. Did her executive realness at Soho House a couple of months ago. Um, I um, I just mix it up. I talk to as many people as I can, and we just create moments. Like, as I say, last year Barbie movie came out. I bought out a cinema. We did a screening for 150 clients. Like, we're those people. Those clients come, they have a vibe, they recommend you. I'm like old school
Yeah,
relationship building. And then I've got my LinkedIn and then now TikTok and YouTube doing that thing. But I will always prefer to meet somebody for a coffee. And most of the people that reach out to me, I do try and get back to. I would say probably 95% of the people I try and get back to comments. Sometimes the world is kicking my ass with the day job. But yeah, there's nowhere in particular. I've just got TFR has predominantly been built on referral. So um, that relationship part and being able to own a room um, and have a presence in a room has been key. And also, I sign up for shit and then I'm like, oh, I can't go. I've got to work late. So I try and manage my expectations of being disappointed because I think I'm off to this. And I'm like, I just want to take my bra off and lie in a dark room and
yeah.
recover from this week. So
I feel you. I feel you. Fair enough. That's fair enough. So those who are listening, if you're out there looking for resources, obviously there's UK Black Comms. I'm a member. There's CIPR, member too. Then you've also got PRCA, and then they've got a mentoring scheme actually called PRISM, which is the Public Relations Inclusion Support Mentoring Scheme. And that's out there and available for you if you're interested as well. So hopefully that helps. Okay, moving you into the last bit, which is around mindset. Okay. So how do you deal with the internal mind war? Essentially, how do you deal with managing self-limiting beliefs?
I don't know if I do. Um, Again, I think this comes down to a degree, who's around you, the people around you that have done it before that you sometimes look at and go, you're actually a bit average. So if you can do it, I can definitely do it. I think, again, I did a TikTok the other day saying, like, once you get into a lot of these rooms, you'll realize that a lot of these people are fairly mediocre. They just have the confidence to believe that they deserve to be in those rooms, right? And that's a whole different
That
game in
is.
itself. So I try and, like, I'm very pragmatic and very realistic, but I also like to operate in a level of delulu. Like, I like to be high on delusion when I'm setting out to do something and we want to pull something off. Again, I strongly believe that the influences around that, like my friends, if we've got a day of a big pitch, I guarantee you by 8 a.m., my WhatsApp will be, you fucking go get them, smash this. Like, that's the energy. And if we have a bad pitch, I will drive to my parents' house, normally lie in their hallway and say, I'm just a girl. That's been my line for the last like little while. And my mum and my dad are like, they're amazingly empathetic and they're self-employed, but they're also tough. Like, there's no way that you're just going to be allowed to wallow in that. My dad is getting me back up and out. So I maybe get 20 minutes of grace to have a bit of a moan. And my dad is that person. I'll go around and I'll have had a shit day and he'll be like, did you make any money today? Like, he's that energy, and that keeps you on your toes. And so my pockets around me, and we'll do a pitch deck and I'll be like, oh shit. And my team are like, Charlotte, this is fucking epic. And I'll have stayed up until 3 a.m. writing it because we'd have had a busy week or whatever. And yeah, I don't let things lay around me for too long in that way. I spend a lot of time in the US. New York is like my super fuel because they do not care. And to give you actually a really good example of that is I was out in New York in September, and a contact of mine works at one of the, well, probably the biggest talent agency in the world. And we had met because another friend of mine in LA had put me on the guest list for the Bridgerton premiere in New York in May. And so us two black women had gone together. And then I went into her HQ in the center of New York, and she was like, "Oh, I've set you up for a meeting with this agent." Anyway, this agent turns out to be one of the agents for one of the biggest pop culture stars right now. We have a meeting. She talks about something that this client, the talent's trying to do next year. I said, "Oh my God, I think I've got a brand that could work for you." I voice note my client saying, "Yo, this could be a madness if we could pull this off." And then suddenly we're in negotiating. And if we can pull it off, you'll see why it's so significant that we do pull it off. But people don't do that. You just sit in a meeting, and you sit in a meeting to respond, not sitting in a meeting to listen and then think about how can I turn this into something for somebody that is game changing in the industry, and forward thinking, and everybody gets a little bit of something, and you make your client look really good. And I don't think that people focus on that enough. And that is a mindset. That is a, how am I going to turn this? And again, because I started with nothing, you don't have a fear of having nothing. Like, it's such a different mindset. I think sometimes people forget that of the people that are born with privilege. I'm like, you must live your life forever on the edge of keeping up with the Joneses. Whereas I live my life on a, today was a vibe. Like we did cool shit. Like, and that is a mindset in itself. But and again, like reading and listening to great people, not the bullshitty people with the quotes and all that. I'm talking about the people that actually did it. I don't know if you know, Timothy Armu, that built Fan Bites and sold it to Brain Labs in 2022. He is brilliant. That was him and two other black friends from school that built that agency that sold it for multi-millions, tens of millions. And again, you should be looking to people like that because they are out there giving you tangible. I wouldn't invest in this business. I'd invest in this. Like that stuff matters as to what you consume. And again, like, I gave up alcohol like forever ago now, years and years ago, because I was like, I don't know if this adds to what I'm trying to do. Like, and again, working in this game and being a non-drinker is quite something.
It is something. You definitely, I mean, when you said that, I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, because in this.
Yeah, it's a choice for what is, I can't say that I'll go the rest of my life without having a glass of Savvy B, but for now of what I wanted to achieve over the last few years, the alcohol, the hangover, was just kicking my ass. And that impacted my mindset. The white wine, over emotional the next day, the jitters. I was like, yo, I can't do this anymore. This needs to be a break. And I wasn't drinking excessively, but I could be out every night of the week at something, having one or two glasses, but I made a decision that I didn't want to do that. But if you go into our office, it is fully stocked with booze because that's a life choice for me. That's not for everybody else.
Yeah, that's really lovely though. Also that you realise that it was impacting you that way. So you're like, I'm going to take a little break. I might revisit it, I might not, but we'll see how it goes from here. I like that. So looking back over your journey, would you do it all again?
Absolutely.
Hey.
I think the first few years of meeting some more of the right people would have changed the trajectory. I know it's taken us longer to get to where we want to get to, but we're still getting there by hook or by crook. It's still happening.
Brilliant. And what is the best and the worst advice you've been given?
I think some of the best is things like hire slowly, fire quickly. Also, no decision is worse than a bad decision. Those are two that are really important. And then kind of the structure around, cash is king and understanding cash flow and there is no business if there is no money. And I think I don't really think that I've had bad advice in that way because I'm really focused on who I listen to and who I'll give the time to give me advice. That there's the general noise that's just around you or whatever. But I'm really picky about what tables I'll sit at to have discussions about business growth, margins, like whatever it might be, because there's a lot of noisy people who are making diddly squat. But they might have a big profile on LinkedIn, and then you can go onto Company's House and go, oh, you've been in a loss for 10 years. You know, due diligence is key when you're going to take advice from people.
Yeah. Well, good point. Good point. Appreciate that. Last question for you is, do you have any rules that you've implemented to help you along your career journey?
I have rules in terms of how I manage myself. Um, and that is really about like letting too many negatives in, and that's really about like as I said to you a couple of questions ago, who I let sit at my table. One of the things about entrepreneurship, and again another wanky term that I hate, but being self-employed or business owner, whatever, is that really jars with me. Sorry, I've just lost my trail of thought. Yes. So I'm very, very, very focused. You probably get from this interview on who's around me. I need people that move at pace, can make decisions, can make bold decisions, aren't living a life of scared of living. I have to have people around me that will just say, fuck it. You know, I've got some pretty sensible, one of my very best friends is very, very big dog in banking in the US. And she has a extravagant but sensible life, if that makes sense, where she's like, babe, where are you? And I'm like, fucking hell, mate, I just did this and I just met this person. And we have the most random conversations. But I need that, you know, the way that I utilize my family for those tough conversations that keep me going. And also like fun. Like we've lot in comms and all this serious agency stuff because everyone wants to be so serious when actually we're convincing people to buy shit that they often don't actually need, right?
Want, right?
There's a reality of what that is. And that's why I say choose your hard. So to me, like enjoying it is really important. As I say, I have some really shit days. This year's been, every variable that could be thrown at you has been thrown. But it's such a privilege to do this. Like, you know, what have I done this afternoon? I've spent an hour and a half having a conversation about myself, you know, hoping that it helps other people. Like, I can't, I can't be that person that takes it too seriously. And I have targets to hit. In London, I have a team of 15, like, you know, there's very real costs and everything else. But there's something about enjoying more of it and not taking yourself so seriously, because often what will be will be.
Yeah. I believe that as well. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Charlotte. It has been so lovely speaking to you. So for those who are listening and may want to connect with you, where can they find you? Can you let them know?
So I'm a TikToker and a YouTuber now. Oh my God, I hate myself. Probably the best way if you want to reach out to me, I'm best on LinkedIn. Actually, that's where I run a proper solid inbox.
Brilliant. Perfect. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. It has been definitely a really interesting chat, very insightful. And there's more stuff I want to talk to you about. I'm like, we're going to have to do this again at some point. But no, this is really, really helpful. And to my listeners, thank you so much for staying tuned. I will be back with some more wonderful people from the world of comms very soon. Until then, stay blessed, stay safe, and bye for now.